Here, this very, very important presentation around the mitigation measures that we can employ together in a bid to mitigate the effects of climate change. So I'm going to take you through my presentation. I want to belabor on some of the points because I'm sure most of the people in the room are also going to speak around that. So we can move to the next slide. So essential elements of crop production include, but are not limited to, genetics, the soil, management. But the elephant in the room today is the weather that we want to talk about. That we want to find measures and methods in which we can circumvent some of the effects that we are seeing that are associated with unforeseen weather vagaries. So the weather is something that we want to talk about. The effects of climate change include the false start to the season, a prolonged mid-season dry spell, increased dry heat units, floods as well in some parts and at some points in time along the season. So these are some of the effects of climate change that we are seeing. And then there's a change in agroecological zones. So we are going to narrow down onto that because that speaks to the effects that climate change has, and Elnino especially has, on the productivity of agriculture, of the agricultural sector. So we can move to the next slide. So now we want to seize the opportunities in the midst of climate change. What can we do? One thing that is going to remain constant is the fact that people will need to eat, people will need clothes, people will need raw materials. So in the midst of climate change, we need to find ways to make it work, which is why we are gathered today to make sure that we find ways to understand better the unforeseen weather vagaries that we are faced with, but then find ways to mitigate them. So the Zimbabwe agroecological zones are classified into 5, with sub-regions in Region 2, where we have 2A and 2B, and Region 5, most recently, has just had the introduction of a Region 5B, which is a direct effect of climate change, where we are seeing that there is a shrinkage in some of the regions, there is an extension in drier regions, there is also an introduction of that other region that we didn't have, which is Region 5B. So what does that say to crop production? What does that say to agriculture as a whole? It means that there are some areas where we used to produce some crops, where we are now not able to produce them. There are some areas that used to receive lower rainfall, but now are receiving plenty rainfall in a very short space of time, but not enough for them to change their production dynamics. So we really need to look into that holistically and with an open mind to find ways in which we can mitigate. So in terms of the climate smart crops and variety selection tips that we want to just give our farmers in a bit to also mitigate, we want to talk about the amount and distribution of rainfall, which I won't speak much on because there's also going to be a speaker who's going to elaborately explain on that. But the amount and distribution of rainfall speaks to the choice of crop, the choice of variety, the time of planting that a farmer is going to decide to hinge on for that particular season. We also talk about the length of the growing season. Is it going to be a short peak season? It might be normal to above normal, but the distribution, do we know in terms of the 10-day focus, in terms of when we have more rainfall than other periods? So it's also important for us to tap into that. The altitude and air temperature, which speaks to the agroecological regions that we might have, the height above sea level, which also speaks to the climate-induced changes that you can see. Then the planting dates. Just yesterday, we were talking as a business when we were having a meeting that we really need to re-evaluate now the planting dates that we recommend per variety, where we are saying that maybe in previous seasons it was okay for us to say you should plant by the 15th of October. And by that time, 15th October, if not the 15th, it was the 22nd of October when the rain would come. But now the rain has shifted significantly to the end of October, even the first week of November, and in some parts even December. So what are we saying about planting dates? Do we shift them forward with the hope that the length of the season will also extend? Or we need to shift them in the sense that we understand that the season is also shifting. So are we saying we are moving from the late maturing to the medium or early maturing varieties? Where are the regions that are going to be maintaining some varieties over others? So the planting dates are also something that we are also going to be looking at. The plant density and stability. So over the years, because of the advent of the digital space, there is access to information. So some farmers might Google and find that there are some areas where farmers are establishing crops at 60,000 plants per hectare. But is that viable in an Elnino season for a dryland farmer? It's not viable in the sense that there's going to be increased competition for moisture, increased competition for growing space, and also increased competition, especially for the limited resources that you might be able to apply, again governed by the climate change-induced changes. So it's very, very important for us to understand that in a drier season, you might want to reduce the population so that you reduce competition. Then the occurrence of diseases, as you have heard that we have now the pink bollworm, which at some point was a major problem, but over the years, it seems to have been overtaken by fall armyworm. But it has come again to the fore. Now they are trying to make sure that they are also going to reduce the productivity of the farmer. So in the green milling window from around August, we have also started seeing the effects of this pink bollworm, where we had some farmers where the green milling crop calling us to come through and see some of